Hello, friends. You're watching The Night Watchman, where every day you'll hear a brand new horror story that will send chills down your spine. But to keep bringing you these terrifying tales, we need your love and support. So don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. Now let's begin the story. I never planned on coming back to Ashbury House. Even saying its name still makes something tighten inside my chest, like a rope pulling from the inside out. The house sits at the far end of Riverton, Maine, on a narrow stretch of road called Ashbury Lane, a place most locals avoid after sundown. I used to think their fear came from small-town superstition, the kind old fishermen whispered about in bars when the fog rolled in. I learned later that the fear was earned. When I drove up after 12 years, the house looked smaller than I remembered, yet somehow heavier, like it was holding its breath for me. My therapist had suggested returning to confront my past. Closure, he called it. But Ashbury House never believed in closure. It only believed in keeping things, especially people. I stepped out of the car, gravel crunching beneath my boots, and stared at the warped wooden porch where my older sister Emily disappeared all those years ago. Police called it a runaway case. I knew better. No one runs away inside their own house. My hands shook as I unlocked the rusted front door. The smell hit first: old wood, damp carpets, and something faintly metallic, like dried blood. I swallowed hard and stepped inside. The memories followed instantly. The living room was untouched. Same cracked leather sofa, same crooked family photos, same heavy silence. But something else lingered, an awareness, as if the house recognized me. I turned on the flashlight. The bulb flickered. The air suddenly dropped 10 degrees. Cold breath brushed my ear. "You came back." I froze. That wasn't my imagination. It was a whisper, soft, close, and unmistakably Emily's voice. I spun around. No one. My heartbeat thundered as I backed toward the kitchen, the floor creaking under my weight. Crack! But then I stopped. That second creak wasn't mine. Something was walking behind me. When I turned, the hallway was empty, except for a faint shadow at the far end, near the staircase. A tall, thin silhouette. My blood went cold. I lifted my flashlight. The shadow vanished instantly, except shadows don't vanish against the light. They vanish when something moves away. I went upstairs. Every step felt like stepping into the mouth of a cave. The smell of dust and mold grew stronger. My old bedroom door was still covered in the stickers I'd slapped on when I was 10. I touched the handle. It was warm, against freezing air. I pulled my hand back. My flashlight flickered again, then steadied. At the end of the hallway, Emily's door stood slightly open, just like the night she disappeared. My throat tightened. I pushed it open. Her room was untouched, her posters, her desk, her clothes still folded on the chair. But then I noticed something new, a square outline on the wall behind her bed, perfectly carved, a hidden panel. That was never there before. I pressed it carefully. The panel clicked, swinging open to reveal a narrow crawl space. A cold, sour smell poured out, like earth that had never seen sunlight. I pointed my light inside. Scratch marks covered the inner walls, deep, desperate scratches. Some spelled words. One was clearer than the rest. "Let me out." My breath stopped, because underneath those words was a name scratched until the wood splintered. Emily. The hallway light behind me flickered violently, then went dark. My flashlight began to pulse. On, off, like the house was breathing. A loud thud echoed downstairs. Then another. Footsteps. Slow, deliberate. Coming up the stairs. I stepped back into Emily's room. Fear clawed up my throat. The footsteps stopped right at the top. Silence. Then a creaking sound, like someone bending the floorboards intentionally. I leaned toward the bedroom doorway. A shadow slid across the hallway wall. Not walking, crawling, upside down. I stumbled backward, gasping. The shadow paused, its head bending toward me in an impossible angle. My flashlight flickered. When it turned fully toward me, I saw her face. Emily, but stretched. Wrong. Her eyes black. Her mouth too wide, as if someone had pulled it open with hooks. Her voice crawled out of the darkness. You left me here. I ran. Down the hallway, down the stairs, through the kitchen. The floor groaned beneath my feet like the house was angry. I tried the back door. Locked. It shouldn't have been locked. All the windows slammed shut at once. Bang, bang, bang. The entire house shook. Then something yanked my leg. Hard. I hit the floor. My flashlight flew from my hand, rolling under the table. A hand, thin, pale, clawed, wrapped around my ankle. Another hand grabbed my other leg. Then a voice whispered beneath the floorboards. Come down. Finish what you started. I kicked free and crawled toward the basement door. It was open. Just a crack. Just wide enough for someone to watch me. Something pushed from behind. The force drove me straight into the basement. The door slammed shut, and the lights flicked on. The basement looked exactly as I remembered, except for the large wooden board in the corner. Nailed over a section of the foundation. Fresh nails. New wood. Someone had been here recently. My heart hammered as I grabbed a rusted crowbar and tore the wood away. Behind it was a small chamber. Inside that chamber was a skeleton, wearing the same clothes Emily wore the night she vanished. I screamed. Before I could move, the basement lights shut off. Total darkness swallowed everything. Then voices filled the room. Dozens of them. Men, women, children, whispering, crying, begging. Then one voice rose above all the others. A voice I had not heard since childhood. My mother. You should have never left her alone. I staggered back. She called for you. She screamed for you. No, no, I didn't hear. You ignored her. The darkness thickened and took shape. A tall figure stepped out from behind the furnace. Its limbs were wrong, its face a blur, its fingers too long. But its voice was my father's. This house keeps what belongs to it. I couldn't breathe. And now you're home. Something grabbed my shoulders from behind. Cold hands, multiple hands, pulling me toward the chamber where Emily's remains lay. I fought, screamed, kicked. But the hands didn't loosen. They dragged me toward the wall. The whispers turned into wails. The house trembled with hunger. I reached out blindly, my hand catching the old fuse box on the wall. Out of instinct, desperation, rage, I grabbed the main lever and yanked it down. A violent spark tore through the basement. Electricity surged. The lights exploded. The entire house convulsed like something living. The hands dragging me shrieked. Yes, shrieked, and loosened. I crawled backward, coughing, choking on smoke and dust. A burning smell filled the air. The walls were cracking. The ceiling groaned. The house was dying, or trying to trap me in its death. I rushed up the stairs. The door at the top shook violently, as if someone on the other side was slamming into it. I rammed it with my shoulder, again and again. The wood splintered, and I burst out into the kitchen. Cold night air hit me like a punch. But the house wasn't done. Every door slammed shut. The floorboards buckled. The walls shook. A deep, non-human roar echoed through every room. I sprinted toward the front door, grabbed the knob. It turned. For the first time in years, it turned. I burst outside. I didn't look back. The house behind me groaned, the windows rattling violently as though some giant creature was thrashing inside its ribcage. Something, or someone, screamed from within. A scream that sounded like my name. Then, silence. Ashbury House settled, still and quiet, like nothing had ever happened. Neighbors gathered at the edge of the street, drawn by the noise. One old man, Mr. Callahan, stepped closer to me. His voice trembled. You went inside, didn't you? I nodded weakly. He swallowed hard. I told the sheriff someone moved the wood. Someone opened the wall again. My heart stopped. Again? Callahan nodded. That house has been sealing its dead for 40 years. I stared at him, shivering. How many? He met my eyes. Too many. I moved out of Riverton the very next morning. I changed my phone number, my address, my job. I thought distance could protect me. But 3 nights later, I woke up to a soft sound at my apartment door. Creak, just like Ashbury House. When I approached the peephole, my blood froze. A small paper slip lay on the floor. I picked it up with trembling fingers. It wasn't paper. It was a piece of my old bedroom wallpaper. A message was scratched onto it, the same jagged handwriting I saw inside the crawlspace. 4 words. You never left. As I stared at the note, the lights in my apartment flickered. Then a cold breath touched my neck, and a whisper, soft, broken, familiar, slid into my ear. Welcome home. Story 2. I never believed one abandoned house could change the entire course of my life. Not until the fall of 2022, when I agreed to help my cousin inspect a foreclosed property sitting on the edge of Ravenhurst Drive, a quiet residential stretch outside Flagstaff, Arizona. People in town called it the house that won't stay sold. Doors locked themselves. Tenants complained of screaming behind walls. One family moved out within 24 hours and refused to speak about what they heard. I should have taken those stories seriously, but I didn't. Not until it was too late. My cousin Daniel Harper, a real estate broker, hated visiting houses alone, especially for closed ones. He called me the night before and said, "Ethan, it's just a quick walkthrough, 15 minutes tops. I'll buy dinner afterward." I had been struggling with depression after losing my job at a manufacturing plant in Phoenix, so I said yes. Maybe a change of scenery would help. When we drove toward Ravenhurst Drive the next morning, the sky looked strangely muted, almost colorless, like it was holding its breath. The house stood at the far end of the street, isolated from the others. 2 stories, metallic gray siding, every window covered from the inside with warped wooden planks, like someone wanted to keep something in rather than out. A rusted mailbox leaned sideways, the name scratched off by deep claw-like marks. I swallowed hard. Something inside me whispered, "Turn around. Leave." But I forced myself to follow Daniel. The front door swung open the moment we touched it. Not unlocked, open on its own. "Old houses shift all the time," Daniel said, trying to laugh it off. But the air inside, it was wrong. Cold, stale, thick, as if hundreds of people had breathed their last breaths here, and the air remembered. The living room looked frozen in time. Dusty gray carpet, toppled bookshelf, a lamp shattered in the corner. On the far wall was a massive hand-shaped smear, dark, dried, and large enough to belong to someone nearly 7 feet tall. Daniel snapped pictures on his phone. While he worked, I felt something brushing the back of my neck, light at first, then firmer, almost like fingertips. I turned. No one. But the air behind me was shifting, swirling in slow circles, as if something invisible stood there. I told myself it was my imagination. It wasn't. We moved deeper inside. The hallway smelled like damp wood mixed with something metallic. I kept glancing at the ceiling. There were soft thumps, like someone pacing directly above us. "No one's here," Daniel reminded me. "Roof's just loose." But roofs don't walk. We climbed the narrow staircase. Each step creaked like bones snapping. Halfway up, we heard footsteps moving fast, running from one bedroom to the next. I froze. Daniel whispered, "Is there a squatter up there?" The footsteps stopped. Silence. Then a slow, dragging sound, like something heavy being pulled across the floor. Daniel reached the top first and scanned the hallway. Empty. No furniture. No footprints. No sign of anyone. Yet the dragging sound continued, this time behind the closed door at the end, the door with deep gouges on it. Like someone trapped inside had tried to claw their way out. Something in my chest tightened. I started trembling. "Let's go," I whispered. But Daniel shook his head. He wanted proof. I wanted life. Daniel grabbed the doorknob, ice cold. The temperature dropped instantly, frosting the knob in seconds. He forced it open. The room was pitch black, except for a sliver of light from the hallway. In the center of the room lay a single wooden chair, facing the corner, as if someone had been forced to sit there and stare endlessly at the wall. The dragging sound had stopped completely. I stepped back. My heart hammered against my ribs. Then the chair turned, slowly on its own. Not violently, not dramatically, just enough to face us. Daniel stepped backward, hitting the wall. A low whisper filled the room. Raspy, layered, like multiple voices speaking from one mouth. "Why did you come back?" My blood ran cold. Daniel whispered, "You heard that too, right?" I couldn't speak. The whisper came again, louder, angrier. "Why did you come back?" The door slammed shut, and something moved behind us. When we turned, the hallway light flickered violently. A long, distorted shadow stretched toward us from the other end. But there was no body casting it. The shadow began crawling across the wall, fast, jittery, limbs bending in ways that defied anatomy. Daniel grabbed my arm. "Run! Run!" We sprinted down the stairs, but the house groaned, shifting like it was alive. Boards warped under our feet. The banister split open. Cold air slammed against us like physical hands trying to hold us back. Halfway down, the attic door above the staircase burst open, and something dropped behind us with a sickening thud. We didn't look. If we had, I don't think we'd be alive. We reached the living room, gasping. That's when I saw her. A woman stood in the corner, pale, drenched, hair matted like seaweed. Her eyes were completely black, like wet coal. Her head twitched as she turned toward us. Her voice hissed, "You opened the door! Now you must stay!" Daniel grabbed my wrist and pulled me toward the exit, but the front door slammed shut, locking itself with a metallic click. The windows followed, bang, 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 shutting one after another. The woman floated forward, not walked, not glided, floated, her feet inches above the ground. Her neck cracked sideways at an impossible angle, nose nearly touching her shoulder. She whispered, "No one leaves the house on Ravenhurst Drive." I could barely breathe. My vision blurred. My legs felt numb. Daniel grabbed a metal rod leaning against the wall. He swung at her. The rod passed straight through. She smiled slowly. "Stay?" Then everything went black. I woke to Daniel shaking me. "Get up, we have one chance." The front door was wide open now, but the woman stood halfway between us and the exit. Only this time, there were two of her, then three, then an entire hallway of identical pale figures, multiplying, blocking the path. Daniel didn't hesitate. He shouted, "Window! Now!" He smashed the nearest boarded window with the metal rod. Wood splintered, glass shattered. The women screamed in unison, a shrill, deafening wail that shook the walls. We climbed through the broken window as dozens of clawed hands reached after us. I fell onto the cold dirt outside, cutting my palms. Daniel landed beside me. We ran until our lungs burned and our legs felt like jelly. Only when we reached the car did we look back. All the windows of the house were now uncovered. Every single one had a pale face staring out. Not watching the house, watching us. Daniel quit real estate the next day. I moved back to Phoenix, but nights became unbearable. I wake up sweating, hearing whispers in the corners of my room. Sometimes I see a pale woman standing near my door. Sometimes her head is tilted toward me, just like before. Last week, Daniel called with a trembling voice. He said, "They're in my house too, Ethan. I think we brought something with us." The call ended abruptly. He hasn't answered since. This morning, I received a letter with no return address. Inside was a single photograph, a picture of my bedroom, taken last night. And standing beside my bed is the same woman, her black eyes staring straight into the camera. Below it, a handwritten message. "You came back." I dropped the photo. My hands are shaking as I write this. There's knocking at my door now, soft at first, then louder. I know who it is, and I know there's no outrunning her anymore. Story 3, I never imagined that my life would fall apart because of a house. A place meant to give shelter, warmth, and a feeling of safety. But the house on Wycliffe Road, in the quiet suburban edges of Stanton, Virginia, did something far darker. It watched, it waited, and it chose. I'm Evan Mitchell, 29, a freelance structural inspector. After my mom passed away from cancer in 2021, I felt suffocated living in our old apartment in Charlotte. Every room reminded me of how quickly life can disappear. I wanted a restart, somewhere quiet, somewhere cheap, somewhere close to my new contract work. That's when I found it, a 3-bedroom old colonial-style home on the outskirts of Stanton. listed for barely $148,000, which was unheard of for that size. The real estate agent, Melanie Shaw, told me the owner had died out of state and the bank just wanted to get rid of it. I should have asked why the price was so low. I should have asked why the house had been empty for 9 years. But grief makes you blind in ways nothing else does. I signed the papers in 2 days, and I moved in on September 23rd. The first night felt heavier than I expected. I don't mean emotionally, I mean the air itself. It was thick, still, almost like the entire house had been sealed shut for years. I unpacked until around 11 p.m., then went upstairs to the master bedroom. At 1:17 a.m., a noise pulled me out of sleep. Thump, thump, thump. It sounded like something knocking inside the walls. Not a pipe, not an animal. A knock. I sat up, heart pounding. "Hello!" My voice sounded stupid, but the noise stopped instantly, like it was listening. I didn't sleep the rest of the night. The second night was worse. I was brushing my teeth in the bathroom when I saw something behind me in the mirror. A figure, tall, thin, outlined in the hallway, just behind my left shoulder. I spun around. The hallway was empty, but colder. I'm talking winter cold, even though it was September. The bathroom light flickered. Then, the shadow moved. Not like a person turning around. It slid across the floor, like mist being pulled away by a vacuum. I froze. I didn't breathe for at least 10 seconds. Then I slammed the bathroom door and stayed inside until sunrise. I told myself I was sleep-deprived, stressed, paranoid. But deep down, I knew better. Something was in the house with me. On my third morning, my next-door neighbor, Mrs. Albright, an old woman with trembling hands, approached me while I was checking the mailbox. She didn't introduce herself. She only asked, "You're living in that house? Alone?" "Yes, ma'am." She stared at me like I had just told her I was sleeping on a highway. Then she whispered, "You hear anything yet?" My heart dropped. I didn't reply. She leaned closer and said quietly, "Don't let it speak to you. If it speaks, it chooses." "Chooses what?" I asked. She began shaking her head like she had said too much. "Just don't stay after midnight, ever." She went back inside, slamming her door behind her. I stood there for a full minute, suddenly aware of how silent Wycliffe Road really was. That evening, around 9:40 p.m., I heard it again. Thump, thump, thump. But this time it wasn't in the walls. It was downstairs. I followed the sound to the basement door. A thin crack of darkness seeped through the bottom. Too dark, even for a basement. I pressed my ear against the wood. Silence. Then, "Evan!" Someone whispered my name from the other side of the door. Every hair on my body lifted at once. My breathing froze. My name. Not hey, not hello, not help me, but my name. I stepped back, heart hammering so violently I could feel it in my throat. Something scraped the inside of the door, slow and deliberate, like nails dragging upward. I ran upstairs and didn't come down again until morning. The next day I drove to Stanton Public Records. Something was wrong with that place, very, very wrong, and I needed to know what. A woman at the records desk pulled 3 thin folders on the house. One of them had a faded headline, 2012, Wycliffe Road Family, Vanishes Without a Trace, the Schraders. A married couple, 40s, one daughter age 9, no forced entry, no signs of struggle, dinner plates still on the table. But what chilled me was the last paragraph. Neighbors report hearing knocking from inside the home for weeks before the disappearance. I almost dropped the paper. Then I found the second folder. The owner before the Schraders died by suicide in the attic. The folder included a single police note. Victim claimed the house was speaking to him. My hands were shaking. I shut the file and thanked the woman. She gave me a sympathetic look and said, "If you're smart, you'll move out before dark." That night I packed half my stuff into my car, planning to finish the rest by morning and be gone. It was 10:56 p.m. when the basement door opened by itself. A long, slow creak echoed through the house. I froze in the living room. I could see the door partially open. and blackness behind it. Not darkness, blackness, like a void. Then footsteps, soft, barefoot, coming up the basement stairs. I whispered to myself, I'm leaving. I'm leaving right now. But I couldn't move. The footsteps stopped at the top of the stairs. A pause, a breath, then, Ivan! A low voice dragged out my name like it was tasting it. I snapped. I ran for the front door, grabbed the knob. It wouldn't turn. I twisted harder. Nothing. Behind me, something exhaled. Long, slow, cold. I felt it on the back of my neck. My knees almost buckled. The lights flickered. The floorboards creaked. The house felt alive, breathing, shifting. The voice whispered again, I choose you. That broke me. I kicked the door with everything I had, and it opened. I sprinted to my car, jumped inside, locked the doors, and peeled out of the driveway so fast the tires squealed. I didn't look in the mirrors. I didn't slow down. I drove until the house disappeared from sight. But the nightmare wasn't over. I checked into a motel 11 miles away, exhausted, shaking, barely able to stand. At 3:12 a.m., the motel room phone rang. I didn't order a wake-up call. No one had my room number. Still, it rang. I picked it up with trembling hands. Hello? My voice cracked. Silence. Then a familiar sound whispered through the receiver. Thump, thump, thump. From inside the phone. I dropped it instantly. My stomach turned. I wasn't in the house anymore, but the house was still with me. I tried to leave the motel that night, but the front door of the building wouldn't open. The night clerk was gone. Every hallway felt colder. When I returned to my room, the lights were off, even though I had left them on. I stepped inside slowly. The air was dead still, and in the corner of the dark room, I saw it. A tall, thin silhouette. No features, no face. Just darkness shaped like a person. My throat tightened. I couldn't scream. I couldn't move. It tilted its head slowly, like it was curious. Then it stepped forward, one slow step at a time. The room temperature dropped until I could see my breath. The voice returned, but this time it wasn't a whisper. It was right beside me. You belong to the house now. I staggered backward. My hand hit the lamp, knocking it over and breaking the bulb. The crash gave me 1 second, one instinctive burst of desperation. I ran, down the hallway, out the emergency exit, across the parking lot. I didn't stop running until I reached the highway. It's been 7 months. I never returned to the house. The bank repossessed it, and last week, they listed it again. Price even lower. The listing photos show something terrifying. In one of the pictures taken in the hallway, a dark silhouette stands behind the bedroom door. They didn't notice it, but I did. The worst part? I've moved states, 500 miles away. New job, new apartment, new life. Yet every few nights, around 1:17 a.m., I hear it again. Thump, 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 from inside my walls. And last night, it spoke my name again. I think it's coming back. I think it never left. I think once the house chooses you, you can never really escape. Story 4. I never believed haunted houses were real. Not in movies, not in books, not in ghost tours around old American towns. But everything changed the fall I moved into the 2-story colonial-style house at 2374 Silver Ridge Road, just outside the small rural town of Redmond Springs, Colorado. My name is Evan Rourke, 29 years old, a freelance restoration architect who buys rundown properties, fixes them, and sells them for profit. That house on Silver Ridge Road, it was supposed to be my biggest flip yet. Cheap, huge, structurally sound, and for reasons no real estate agent could explain, it had been sitting vacant for nearly 14 years. The first day I arrived, I noticed something strange. Not the boarded windows, not the overgrown yard, not even the eerie silence surrounding the property. It was the front door. It was cracked open. I knew for a fact the bank had locked it. The agent had even shown me the keys sealed in an envelope. But that door, it looked like someone had just stepped inside moments before I arrived. When I pushed it open, it groaned like something alive. The smell inside was somehow both dusty and damp, like the house had been holding its breath for years and finally exhaled. And then I saw it, a single muddy footprint on the wooden hallway floor. Just one, pointing toward the basement door. I should have left right then, but I convinced myself it had to be from an animal or maybe a trespasser. Nothing supernatural, nothing dramatic. Redmond Springs had only about 4,000 people. Folks there were friendly, but the moment I mentioned the address, their faces stiffened as if I'd said something unforgivable. "That place ain't right," an old gas station clerk named Gordon Teller muttered. "You fixin' to stay there alone?" "I'll be fine," I said. "Just here to restore it." His eyes didn't blink. "People hear things in that house, things they ain't supposed to hear." I brushed it off. Every old town had rumors. But that night, the first night, I realized the rumors didn't even begin to cover the truth. The electricity wouldn't come on, so I worked under lantern light, unpacking tools and clearing debris. I found old family photos upstairs, blurred as if the faces had been smeared by someone's thumb. A dusty baby crib in the master bedroom, an antique rocking chair that kept shifting position every time I left the room. But the real terror began at 1:39 a.m. I was downstairs fixing a loose kitchen cabinet when I heard quiet footsteps upstairs. Deliberate, slow, too heavy to be an animal. I froze, my breath trapped in my throat. The footsteps moved across the ceiling, stopped directly above me, and then, unmistakably, something ran, full speed toward the staircase. I grabbed a wrench, positioned myself defensively, and stared at the dark stairwell. Nothing came down, not footsteps, not a person, not a sound, just silence thick enough to choke on. The next morning, I found the rocking chair in the master bedroom turned toward the wall, positioned like someone was sitting in it, staring at something only they could see. But I kept working. I always kept working. I told myself I was hearing house noises after years of silence. 3 days into renovation, I discovered the locked basement door. Not the one in the hallway where the footprint had been. A second door, hidden behind a wall of drywall that should not have been there. Someone had covered the original basement entrance with fresh construction sometime long after the family vanished. Who the hell would wall off a basement? When I tore the drywall down, I found the door behind it, an old wooden one, with heavy scratch marks on the inside, as if something or someone had desperately tried to claw their way out. But the strangest thing was the padlock. It wasn't old. It was brand new. Someone had locked it from the outside. Not years ago, but recently. I cut the lock. When I opened the door, a blast of freezing air hit me so violently that my lantern flickered out. The smell in that basement was metallic, cold, almost like blood. My instincts screamed, "Don't go down." But my pride whispered louder. I took 3 steps down the staircase and heard soft breathing in the darkness below. Human breathing. Slow, wet, too close. I froze mid-step. My lantern flickered. A shape shifted near the far wall. Tall, thin, moving in ways no person should move. When the lantern light finally steadied, the shape was gone. But the breathing continued. Right behind me. I turned so fast I nearly fell backward. But there was nothing. Just a cold whisper brushing my left ear. "Leave." I didn't need to be told twice. I sprinted up the stairs, slammed the door shut, and pushed a cabinet against it. The house felt wrong, alive, watching. I drove into town and marched straight toward Sheriff Amanda Crowley's office. She was in her early 40s, sharp-eyed and known for being brutally honest. "There's someone in my house," I said. "I heard them breathing in the basement." Her eyebrows lowered. "Which house?" 237 4 Silver Ridge Road. She stiffened like everyone else. Then she unlocked a drawer and pulled out an old manila folder. "This house has history," she said quietly. "Bad history. You sure you want to know?" I nodded. What she told me chilled my blood. 14 years ago, the Haskell family lived there. Parents, Michael and Dana, and their 6-year-old daughter, Lila. One night, Dana called 911 whispering, "Someone is walking inside the walls." By the time deputies arrived, the house was silent. All 3 family members were gone. No signs of forced entry, no bodies. But in the basement, etched into the concrete floor, they found hundreds of scratch marks. And the phrase, "he won't let us out." The sheriff closed the file. The house was built in 1917 by a man named Archer Hale, she said. He was a recluse, a rumored occultist. People said he believed the house was a vessel for something watching him. My stomach twisted. What happened to him? She hesitated. They found him bricked shut inside one of the basement walls. No tools, no food, no exit. Like he sealed himself in from the inside. I felt lightheaded. The sheriff placed a hand on my shoulder. If you stay there, I can't promise you'll walk out. But going back was the one thing I had to do. I'm not the kind of man who's scared easily. I should have been. That night, the house greeted me with a new silence. That dangerous kind of quiet, the kind that feels intentional. At 11:52 p.m., I heard a faint creaking from upstairs. I walked to the staircase and saw the rocking chair moving again. But this time, it wasn't empty. Something small sat in it. A little girl, her back turned toward me. Dirty blonde hair, shadows wrapped around her like a second skin. "Lila," I whispered. I didn't want to say her name, but it slipped out. Her head turned unnaturally slow. Her face wasn't right. Not torn, not ghostly, just wrong. Like her features didn't belong to her. Like they were borrowed. Her mouth opened, not wide but trembling, and a voice too deep to belong to a child came out. "He lives in the walls." My knees nearly buckled. The girl pointed a thin finger toward the hallway wall. I pressed my ear against it, scraping, slow, deliberate, like fingernails dragging down the wooden beams inside. I stepped back, heart hammering. The little girl's eyes widened, not in fear, but in warning. "He's coming." The hallway lights flickered. The air became so cold my breath fogged. Then the scraping inside the walls turned into pounding, heavy, powerful, getting closer. The wall bulged outward as if something enormous behind it was forcing its way through. I ran. I barricaded myself inside the living room, shoving furniture against the door. The pounding continued throughout the house, walls shaking, floorboards bending. Something was moving through the structure, not walking, not crawling, slithering. The house vibrated like a living creature. I whispered to myself over and over, "This can't be real. This can't be real." But then came the voice, a deep, distorted voice echoing from every corner of the house. "Stay!" My breath hitched. "Stay with me!" The floorboards bulged beneath my feet. Something was pushing up from underneath the planks. I grabbed my lantern and an axe from my tool bucket. If I was going to die, I'd at least die fighting. But the house didn't want me dead. It wanted me kept. The living room door handle slowly turned on its own, then stopped. Silence. Then a whisper, right behind me, though no one was there. The basement. It wasn't a threat. It was a command. And disobeying didn't seem like an option. The house began to creak and shift, floorboards sliding like they were rearranging themselves. The walls groaned. Furniture slid across the room. The house was guiding me, forcing me, toward the basement door. When I reached the door, the cabinet I'd shoved earlier was gone, as if it had been lifted away by invisible hands. The door swung open by itself. Cold air poured out, chilling my skin instantly. Lantern in one hand, axe in the other, I walked down the staircase. Every step echoed like entering a tomb. Halfway down, the air thickened. I saw carvings on the walls, fresh ones. Words scratched violently. "He walks behind you." I spun around. Nothing. But the air behind me felt displaced, like someone had just moved past. When I reached the basement floor, I shone the lantern around. The far wall, where I'd earlier seen that distorted shape, was different. The bricks looked pushed outward, as if something inside the wall was swelling. I leaned closer. A faint heartbeat pulsed through the bricks. Then the wall split, cracked, burst outward. A tall, impossibly thin figure stepped out. Its limbs were long, spindly, bent in unnatural angles. Its skin was pale and stretched tight like wet parchment. Its face had no features, just a smooth surface, with faint impressions under the skin, like faces pressing from inside, trying to escape. It moved toward me, joints clicking. I stumbled back, gripping the axe. "What are you?" I whispered. 1,000 whispers answered at once. "We are the house." The figure lunged. I swung the axe wildly. It cut through empty air. The creature vanished and reappeared behind me, claws wrapping around my ankle, dragging me toward the cracked wall. I grabbed a wooden support beam, pulling with all my strength. The whispers grew violent, angry, desperate. "Stay! Stay! Stay!" I swung the lantern back and smashed it against the creature's arm. Fire exploded outward. The creature shrieked, a sound like glass shattering, and released me. Flames spread fast, clinging to the wooden beams. The house began to scream. Not creak, not groan. Scream. I crawled up the stairs as the walls caught fire. Every door slammed shut behind me. Every window locked itself. But the smoke weakened the house's control. The front door, which had stayed stubbornly closed for days, suddenly swung open. I sprinted out as flames erupted through the windows. When I reached the street, I collapsed. The house burned in complete silence. No crackling, no roaring, just a tall silhouette in the flames. The creature standing in the window, watching me. I could swear it whispered, "We'll build another." The roof collapsed shortly after. By morning, the house was nothing but ashes. The sheriff asked me what happened. I told her the truth. She didn't laugh. She didn't doubt. She simply said, "That house has burned down twice before." My blood froze. No one rebuilt it. It rebuilt itself. It's been 3 months since I fled Redmond Springs. I moved to Arizona, far from Colorado, far from woods, far from anything resembling that cursed structure. But last night, outside my apartment window, I heard faint scraping, slow, deliberate, inside the walls. And when I woke this morning, muddy footprints led to the closet door. Just one print, pointing inward. I think it found me. I think it rebuilt itself. And tonight, I hear breathing on the other side of the wall. Slow, wet, too close. I'm writing this so someone knows what happened if I disappear like the Haskell family. Because whatever lives inside those walls isn't done with me yet. Story 5. I never believed a house could have a memory. People, yes. Places, maybe. But a house? Never. That changed the moment I stepped inside 3157 Barrow Creek Road, a lonely 2-story home sitting at the edge of Ridgefall, North Carolina, a quiet American town people rarely visit unless they're lost or running from something. I wasn't lost, but maybe I was running from a life falling apart faster than I could repair it. My name is Evan Mercer, 29, born and raised in Phoenix, Arizona. After losing my job as a commercial video editor, ending a 4-year relationship, and draining my savings just to keep going, I needed a cheap place, any place that didn't require credit checks or long leases. That's when I found the listing. Fully furnished rural home for rent, $450 per month, immediate move-in. Too good, suspiciously good, but desperation makes people blind, and I signed the agreement without seeing the property. When I pulled up in my old Ford Focus, the first thing I noticed was the silence. Not just quiet, silence like the world muted itself around the house. Second thing, every house on Barrow Creek Road was abandoned. Every single one, except the one waiting for me. Inside, everything looked preserved, like time had stopped mid-breath. The living room still smelled faintly of perfume and dust. Family photos hung on the walls, all faces scratched out with something sharp. I remember staring at one picture, a man holding 2 little girls. Their faces were carved so violently that splinters of glass still clung to the frame. I told myself it was vandalism. Teenagers, trespassers, anything normal. But when I explored the bedroom upstairs, I found something I couldn't explain. A rocking chair swaying gently, moving on its own, even though the windows were shut tight. I froze at the doorway. "Hello?" Even my voice sounded unwelcome here. The chair slowed, stopped, and then, creak. It started rocking again, this time faster, as if reacting to me standing there. I stepped back so quickly I nearly tripped down the stairs. That night I slept on the couch with all the lights on. I didn't notice the dark shape watching from the staircase until much later. Next morning, I saw an older man standing across the road, thin, pale, wearing an old baseball cap. He stared at my house like someone watches a grave being dug. I walked over. "You the new tenant?" he asked. "Yes, name's Evan. You live around here?" He didn't answer the last question. Instead, he pointed at the house behind me. "Nobody should live in that place." My stomach tightened. "Why? What happened?" He didn't blink. "They never leave." "Who?" He turned and walked away without another word. I stood there confused until my phone buzzed. Unknown number. "Don't sleep in that house again. They know you're there." I whipped around, scanning for someone watching me, but no one was there. Only the man who had vanished around a corner. I blocked the number, but I didn't forget the message. That night, the air in the house felt thicker, warmer, like someone breathing behind my neck the entire time. I tried to distract myself. YouTube, movies, anything, but the electricity kept flickering, like the house hated noise. Around 1:40 a.m., I heard something upstairs. Tap, tap, tap. Light footsteps, but not walking, pacing. I grabbed a flashlight, climbed the stairs slowly, and stopped outside the master bedroom. Silence. I pushed the door open. The room was empty, except the closet door was half open. I don't know why I walked toward it. Curiosity, fear, stupidity. Whatever the reason, I reached for the door and pulled it wide. Nothing. Just coats, boxes, dust. Then something whispered behind me. "Ivan!" A cold rush shot through me. I spun around. No one there. But the whisper wasn't the worst part. The worst part was that it came from inside the closet. I slammed the door shut and ran downstairs, heart pounding so violently I could hear it echo in the walls. The lights flickered off. Pitch darkness swallowed me. And in the dark, the staircase creaked. Like someone was walking down slowly. One step, another, another. I didn't breathe until the sun rose. I drove to Ridgefall Public Library the next morning. A place like that house doesn't stay quiet forever. After an hour of digging through old newspapers, I found it. Barrow Creek Family Tragedy. 1998, homeowner. Daniel Crow. Wife, Marissa Crow. Daughters Emily, 10. Hannah, 7. All missing. Never found. But one line made my skin crawl. Neighbors reported seeing the children walking in the yard weeks after they were declared missing. Another article, several tenants attempted living there. None stayed longer than 3 days. I was on day 2. I wanted to leave. I swear I did. But the rent was cheap and I was broke. So I convinced myself the house wasn't haunted, just old, creaky, weird. That night, I regretted that decision. I woke at 3:17 a.m. to soft giggling downstairs. Children giggling. I froze on the couch, eyes wide open. The temperature around me dropped instantly. My breath came out white. The giggling grew louder, circling the living room. Tiny footsteps pitter-pattered behind the furniture. Then, tap, tap, tap. 3 knocks on the back of the couch directly behind my head. I didn't move. Couldn't move. I slowly turned my head. 2 small figures stood there. Girls. Hair dripping wet. Clothes muddy. Faces pale and swollen, like they had drowned. Their lips parted in a slow, impossible smile. "Come play with us," one whispered. "No!" My voice cracked. The smaller one tilted her head so sharply I heard a snap. "You're staying with us now." The lights exploded, every bulb bursting at once. Glass rained across the floor. In the shards, reflected everywhere, were dozens of tiny footprints running in circles. I bolted outside barefoot and didn't stop running until I reached the road. The old man from earlier was waiting. "I told you they never leave," he said quietly. "And once they notice you..." He looked at the house with terror. "They follow." I didn't go back inside that night. I slept in my car at a gas station 2 miles away. I thought leaving the property would solve everything. But at 4:12 a.m., someone knocked on my car window. 3 soft taps, just like the couch. I turned slowly. 2 little muddy handprints smeared across the glass. My blood turned cold. I drove away from Ridgefall as fast as I could, and checked into a cheap motel in another town. I stayed awake until sunrise, then finally managed to fall asleep, only to wake up to the closet door in my motel room standing wide open. I hadn't touched it, and carved into the inside wall in small, frantic handwriting were the words, "We found you." I changed motels, cities, roads, states, but no matter where I went, things followed. Footsteps behind me in empty halls, children's laughter in parking garages, wet footprints forming under motel doors, closet doors opening on their own, whispered voices saying my name. I visited a pastor in Tennessee. He refused to see me after one session. I spoke to a paranormal group in Virginia. They stopped responding after their equipment fried when I walked into their office. I even tried burning all the belongings I brought from the house, clothes, toothbrush, everything. The phenomena stopped for 2 days. Then I woke up on the third night to find a small, muddy handprint on my pillow. My heart shattered. There was no escaping them. Unless I returned to the house. I drove back to Ridgefall under an orange sunset, the sky burning like the world knew what waited for me. The old man was on his porch. "You shouldn't have come back," he said without turning. "I can't live like this," I replied. "How do I end it?" He turned to me, eyes tired, almost broken. "You don't end it. You join them." I swallowed hard. Inside the house, everything was exactly how I left it. Except the rocking chair. It was moving again. Faster this time, violently. The temperature dropped so fast I saw frost forming on the walls. Then I heard them. The girls, the mother, the father, whispers spilling from every corner. And then Daniel Crow stepped out of the hallway. Tall, shoulders slumped, eyes hollow and black. "You stayed in our home," he said, voice distorted like it came through old water pipes. "That makes you one of us." The walls groaned. The floor shook. Doors slammed shut. I ran, but the house sucked the air out of my lungs, dragging me back like gravity was stronger inside it. A cold hand gripped my shoulder. I turned. The little girls stared up at me. "Don't be scared," Emily whispered. "It only hurts at first." Everything went black. If someone is reading this, it means I managed to get these pages out. But I'm not alive. Not exactly. I walk the halls of 3157 Barrow Creek Road now. Sometimes I sit in the rocking chair. Sometimes I watch through the upstairs window. Sometimes I stand behind new tenants while they sleep. If you ever see a listing for a cheap home in Ridgefall, don't go. Don't even drive down Barrow Creek Road. Because once the house notices you, you're already inside. Story 6, I never believed real estate could ruin someone's life. Stress you out? Sure. Make you broke? Definitely. But destroy you from the inside out? That only became real to me the year I moved to Hollow Ridge Lane, a quiet residential road in Starkville, Colorado, a place locals warned me about, though never directly. People there had a strange habit of changing the subject when I mentioned the address, like they knew something but refused to say it out loud. But I had already signed the papers, and I had no idea what was waiting for me inside that old house. I was 29 when I moved into the 2-story Victorian at the very end of Hollow Ridge Lane, fresh out of a messy breakup, hungry for a fresh start, and too proud to move back with my parents in Nebraska. The house was old, built in 1894, with a wraparound porch, white shutters, and a crooked mailbox that creaked every time the wind brushed it. It felt forgotten. Cheap, too cheap for the area. But that's exactly why I ignored every red flag. My real estate agent, Matthew Keene, smiled too much while telling me, "It's a great deal." His hands shook when he gave me the keys, like he wanted to get rid of them as quickly as possible. "People don't stay long on Hollow Ridge Lane," he said quietly while I signed the last page. "Why?" He hesitated. "They just move on." That was the first time something felt wrong. But I moved in anyway. The first night was quiet, too quiet for a house that big. No neighborhood noise, no passing cars, just the faint rustle of dry leaves scratching against the porch steps. Around 2:13 a.m., something woke me up, a sound like footsteps on hardwood, slow, careful, heavy. I froze in bed, listening. The house was empty. I lived alone. But the footsteps continued, moving from the hallway to the top of the stairs, then stopping. Silence. I told myself old houses make noises. Wood settles. Pipes expand. But I couldn't shake the feeling someone was standing just outside my bedroom door, listening to me breathe. When I finally opened the door at sunrise, the hallway felt colder than the rest of the house, as if someone had been standing there all night, watching. Over the next few days, things got weirder. Doors unlocked themselves. I would lock the front door before bed and find it wide open the next morning. Lights flickered when I walked under them, as if reacting to my presence. Old photographs kept appearing, small black and white photos of a family of 5, none of whom I recognized. Worse, the photos kept showing up in places I never placed them, on the kitchen counter, on my bed, inside cabinets. A horrible smell filled the basement, like burnt hair and wet earth. Every night the footsteps came back. Every night they got closer. One afternoon while grabbing mail, a woman from across the street approached me. Her name was Erica Mason, a single mother in her 30s with tired eyes and a voice that trembled whenever she talked about my house. "You live there now?" she asked softly, staring at the porch like it was dangerous. "Yeah, why?" She hesitated, glancing around as though someone was watching us. "You should leave before it gets dark." I laughed nervously. "Why? Is this some neighborhood welcome prank?" Erica didn't smile. "The last family that lived there—" She stopped mid-sentence, fear tightening her face. "What happened to them?" I asked. She swallowed hard. "Just listen. If you hear knocking from inside the walls, don't answer it, no matter what." Before I could ask anything else, she hurried back into her house, locked her door, and closed every curtain. I stood in the yard, shaken, holding my mail with trembling hands. What exactly was inside my house? That night it happened. Around 3:08 a.m., I woke up to a soft, rhythmic knocking. Not on my door, not on the windows, inside the walls. 3 knocks. A pause. 3 more. Like someone trapped inside and begging to come out. My chest tightened. I froze. The knocking grew louder, moving from one section of the wall to another, following me as I slowly stepped back. "Hello?" I whispered before I realized how stupid that was. The knocking stopped instantly, as if responding to my voice. Then something whispered back, a soft, crackling voice from inside the drywall. "You found us!" I screamed and ran out of the room. That was the moment I knew Hollow Ridge Lane wasn't normal. The next morning, exhausted but desperate, I forced myself into the basement, the place that always smelled wrong. The smell was worse now, thicker, rotten. I turned on the light. The basement wasn't empty. Against the far wall, half covered in dust, I found a wooden door built into the concrete. Not a normal basement door. This one was reinforced with nails all along the edges, as if someone had tried to keep something inside. Carved into the wood were 4 words. "They never left this house." My mouth went dry. My pulse hammered in my ears. I reached out slowly and touched the handle. The moment my fingers brushed it, something slammed from the inside. The entire basement shook. The light flickered violently. A low, distorted moan seeped through the cracks in the wood. I stumbled back, heart slamming in my chest. Whatever was behind that door, it wasn't human anymore. Terrified, I ran outside and drove straight to the county records office. The clerk, an older man named Harold Boone, looked nervous the moment I said my address. "Hollow Ridge Lane again," he whispered. "That house should have been demolished years ago." "Why wasn't it?" "Because every time the town tries, someone gets hurt. People vanish." He pulled out a file, yellowed, thick, and covered in dust. The house was once owned by the Dawson family in the early 1900s. 5 members. All found dead inside the walls when the house was renovated in 1924. Their bodies had been sealed away, buried alive. But their cause of death wasn't suffocation. It was listed as extreme terror. I felt my stomach twist. Harold leaned closer and whispered, "They say the Dawsons never moved on. Anyone who lives there hears them, trying to get out." I returned home shaken, ready to pack and leave. But the moment I stepped inside, The house slammed the door behind me. Every light turned off. Footsteps circled me in the dark. Heavy, slow, purposeful. Whispers crawled along the walls. Stay. We waited. Join us. I backed toward the staircase, but the wooden door in the basement suddenly exploded open, nails flying like shrapnel. And from that doorway, 5 shadow-like figures emerged. Tall, thin, bodies twisted unnaturally, faces pale and stretched as if frozen in their last moments of terror. The Dawson family. They reached for me with shaking, bony hands. Their mouths opened in silent screams. I ran up the stairs, stumbling toward the front door, but the house worked against me. Doors slammed, walls shook, windows sealed shut. The house did not want me to leave. One of the figures whispered behind me, cold breath against my ear. You live here now. I used every bit of strength left, threw myself through the living room window, landed on the porch, and sprinted into the street. The house roared behind me like something alive. I never returned. I live 3 states away now. Different number, different job, different life. But some nights when the world is quiet and my apartment settles, I still hear knocking inside the walls. 3 knocks, a pause, 3 more. Like they followed me, like they're still trying to get out. And every time, I stay absolutely silent, because Erica was right. You never answer what knocks from inside the walls. Story 7, I never believed in haunted houses. Not really. I believed in creaking wood, old wiring, strange drafts, things you could explain if you looked hard enough. But all of that changed the night I stepped into the abandoned house on Redwood Hollow Lane, the one people in town still avoid even during broad daylight. My name is Ethan Cole, and before that night, the scariest thing in my life was the stack of unpaid bills on my kitchen counter. I worked long hours at a local hardware store, living alone in a 1-bedroom apartment above a noisy laundromat in Cedar Grove, New Mexico. Life wasn't perfect, but it was simple. Then came the house. It started with an unexpected call from a woman named Margaret Lewis. She said she owned a property, an old 2-story home on Redwood Hollow Lane. She wanted to remodel and sell it, but the last 3 workers she'd hired had quit suddenly. Personal reasons, she'd said, her voice shaky in a way she tried to hide. I didn't think much of it. People quit jobs all the time, and I needed the money. She offered double my usual inspection rate if I could go that night. A house at night, in a part of town where trees leaned over the road like they were whispering secrets. It should have been a red flag, but desperation makes you blind. I grabbed my toolkit and drove. Redwood Hollow Lane was darker than any street in Cedar Grove. Even the streetlights stopped 2 houses before the property, as if they didn't want to get any closer. The house stood at the end of the road, peeling white paint, boarded windows on the 2nd floor, and a crooked porch that sagged like it carried too many memories. As soon as I stepped out of my truck, the air felt colder. Not breezy, cold like someone opened a freezer door at my back. I shook it off and walked up the porch. The boards groaned under my feet as I unlocked the front door with the key Margaret left in the mailbox. The moment I opened it, the smell hit me. Old wood, rotting fabric, and something else. Something metallic. The kind of smell you get from dried blood. Again, I told myself it was just an old house. Just an old house. Inside, the layout was old-fashioned. A narrow hallway, a staircase on the left, and rooms branching off into darkness. My flashlight beam cut through the dust floating in the air. For the first 15 minutes, everything was normal. Floorboards, cracked walls, water damage. Then I heard it. A soft, deliberate knock from upstairs. Not a random house sound, not the wind. A knock. 3 times. Like someone wanted my attention. I froze, flashlight trembling in my hand. The house was supposed to be empty. I even checked the property perimeter before entering. "Hello?" I called out. Silence. I swallowed hard and took a step toward the staircase. Before I even placed my foot on the first step, the knock came again. Only this time it was behind me. I spun around so fast my flashlight slammed into the wall. But there was nothing. Just the hallway, quiet and empty. I should have walked out right then. But curiosity, stupid curiosity, won, and I kept going. I reached the top of the stairs. My light fell on a door at the end of the hallway, partially open, like someone had just stepped inside. I pushed it wider. Inside, the room was empty except for a broken wooden chair and long, jagged scratches covering the walls, carved deep into the plaster. They weren't random. They were desperate, like someone was trying to dig their way out. I moved the flashlight across the marks, trying to make sense of them. My breath caught in my throat when I realized some of the scratches. Spelled words. Don't stay. Below it, another set of scratches. Leave before he wakes. A chill raced down my spine. My phone vibrated in my pocket, and I nearly jumped out of my skin. It was a text from an unknown number. You shouldn't be in that room. I stumbled back, staring at the screen. Before I could reply, another message came. Get out. Now. I looked around the empty room again. I wasn't alone. I could feel it. I ran out of the room and scanned the hallway. That's when I saw him. At the far end of the hall stood a tall figure, completely still, facing me. I couldn't see his face. My flashlight flickered as if something drained the batteries. He didn't move. He didn't breathe. He just stood there. I tried to speak, but my voice cracked. Who are you? Nothing. The figure stepped forward once, but it didn't sound like a footstep. It sounded like the walls themselves shifted. I took a step back. He took another step forward. My flashlight died completely. In pitch darkness, I heard him whisper in a low, broken voice. You shouldn't have come. I bolted. I didn't care about the job anymore. Money wasn't worth this. I ran toward the stairs, but the wooden steps suddenly twisted, shifting under my feet like something alive. I grabbed the railing and felt something icy grip my wrist. Fingers, long and bony. Not human, not warm, cold as death. I yanked my arm away and tumbled down the stairs, crashing hard onto the floor. Pain shot through my shoulder, but adrenaline pulled me up. The front door was only a few steps away. I sprinted, but then the door slammed shut on its own. Loud, violent. The house seemed to inhale. The lights, yes, the house had no power, yet the hallway lights flickered on, glowing a dim reddish color. Behind me, footsteps echoed from the top of the stairs. Slow, rhythmic, heavy, coming closer. I grabbed my toolkit and smashed the small window beside the living room. But as I was about to climb out, something pulled me back. Not a hand this time. The house. It felt like the house itself was breathing, exhaling through the walls. The floorboards shook and a trapdoor near the kitchen flung open by itself. A staircase led down into darkness. And then I heard a voice, faint, trembling, terrified. Help! Please help me! A woman, alive. I couldn't leave someone behind, so I stepped toward the basement door. The air turned colder with each step. The darkness below felt thick, heavy enough to touch. As I went down, my flashlight blinked back to life for a moment, enough to reveal what was in the basement. Old furniture, broken mirrors, ropes hanging from ceiling beams, and in the corner, a woman sitting on the floor, knees pulled to her chest, hair covering her face. Ma'am, I whispered. She lifted her head. Her eyes were completely white. Too late, she breathed. The basement door slammed shut. The lights burst on, flooding the basement with a sickly yellow glow. Footsteps descended the stairs behind me. Slow, measured, not the woman. She stayed frozen in the corner, staring through me. A deep voice spoke from the shadows. You people never learn. I turned. A man stepped into view. Not the figure I saw upstairs. This one looked terrifyingly human, but wrong. His skin looked stretched tight over his bones, and his eyes were hollow as though something inside him had already left. I told her not to bring anyone else, he said, but she doesn't listen. Who are you? I stammered. He smiled, revealing teeth broken into sharp, unnatural shapes. I'm the owner. My heart sank. But Margaret told me, he chuckled softly. Margaret died in this basement 12 years ago. I felt my knees weaken. She still calls people here, he continued. She's very loyal. The woman in the corner tilted her head mechanically. My phone buzzed again. I slowly pulled it out. A text from the same unknown number. Run. I didn't think, I just moved. I swung my metal toolkit at the man's head. It barely fazed him, but he stumbled long enough for me to sprint past the hanging ropes and broken furniture. The basement door wouldn't budge, so I kicked it repeatedly until the wood splintered. As I scrambled out, I heard him snarling behind me, an inhuman sound that shook the walls. I ran through the house, ignoring the shifting floors, the whispers, the cold fingers brushing my neck. I threw myself through the broken window, glass cutting into my arms, but I didn't stop running until I reached my truck. I sped away so fast I nearly lost control. When I looked back, the house seemed to stand taller, watching me, breathing. When I got home shaking and covered in cuts, I checked my phone one last time. The unknown number had sent a final message. 5 words. He knows where you live. My phone screen went black. And then, someone knocked on my apartment door. 3 slow, deliberate knocks. The same rhythm from the house. I haven't opened it. I don't think I ever will. Story 8. I was never the kind of person who believed in haunted houses. Ghost stories were for campfires, sleepovers, or those low-budget horror movies that rely more on jump scares than logic. But everything changed the night I stepped into the house on Dorset Hollow Road, a place locals whispered about but never spoke of directly, as if saying too much might wake something that should have stayed asleep. My name is Evan Clark, 28 years old, born and raised in the quieter parts of Maryland. I worked construction most of my life, following in my father's footsteps until he passed away in 2020. After that, life wasn't the same. I bounced between jobs, moved place to place, always searching for something that could make me feel grounded again. That's how I ended up taking a last-minute contract to renovate an abandoned house deep in Dorset Hollow, an area where streetlights didn't exist, where the woods swallowed sound, and where even the GPS gave up halfway. It was supposed to be easy money. I should have known nothing easy comes without a price. The house stood at the very end of the long dirt road, crooked like an old spine bent by age. Every window was dark. The porch sagged. Paint peeled in long strips like shedding skin. The entire structure leaned slightly to the left, as if gravity itself had been slowly pulling it down for decades. The owner, Mr. Larkin, wasn't a person anyone saw often. He was old, maybe late 70s, but sharp in the eyes. He handed me the keys, warned me not to stay after sunset, and said one last thing before driving off in his rust-red pickup. If you hear knocking from inside the walls, do not knock back. I laughed, thinking he was joking. He didn't laugh with me. I started with the living room. Dust covered everything in a thick blanket. The smell of wet earth seeped from the floorboards. Tools echoed loudly whenever they dropped, the sound bouncing around the empty rooms like something was listening. By 7 p.m., darkness poured through the windows. I planned to pack up and leave, but my phone buzzed. Rainstorm alert, heavy downpour expected, roads flooding. The dirt road outside would turn to mud, making it impossible to drive back. So I stayed. I wish I hadn't. Around 9 p.m., as I sealed a crack near the floor, I heard it. Knock. Soft. 3 taps. From inside the wall. At first I froze, convinced it was an animal. Mice, raccoons, anything normal. But then came the second knock. Knock, knock, slow, deliberate, too rhythmic to be an animal. That's when Mr. Larkin's warning echoed in my mind. I backed away slowly. Something moved behind the wall, light footsteps dragging, like bare feet sliding across wood. The storm outside screamed. Thunder shook the glass. Inside the house, something else moved. I set up my sleeping bag on the living room floor, flashlight tucked next to me. I told myself the noises were old pipes or the storm playing tricks. Around midnight, the footsteps returned. This time they traveled across the ceiling, slow, heavy steps, as if someone crawled on all fours. I held my breath. The air turned icy. Then a woman whispered right beside my ear, "He's still in the walls!" I shot up so fast I almost fell back down. My flashlight flickered. For a split second, I saw someone standing in the left corner of the room. A woman in faded clothes, head tilted, hair covering her face. And then she was gone. Just gone. I packed my bag immediately, ready to sprint into the storm if needed. But before I reached the door, something slid out from beneath it, a small piece of paper. On it, written in shaky handwriting, "Don't leave. It's worse outside." My hands shook violently. I dropped the paper. Who put that there? No footsteps, no shadow, nothing. The house wasn't empty. By morning, the storm stopped, but my car tires were half buried in mud. I couldn't leave until the ground dried, so I returned inside to get my tools and finish enough work to get paid. That's when I noticed something new, a door I hadn't seen before. It was behind a wooden shelf that looked recently moved. The door was small, painted black, with deep scratch marks on it, long, desperate scratches. Even though every part of me screamed no, I opened it. Stairs led downward into cold air that smelled like rot. My flashlight shook as I descended. The basement looked untouched for decades, filled with broken furniture, dusty trunks, and claw marks all over the concrete floor. Then I saw the wall, or rather, the hole in it, big enough for a person to crawl into. Around the edges, dried blood streaked the concrete. A chill ran down my spine as I crouched, peering into the darkness of the narrow crawl space. I whispered, "Hello?" From the blackness, something whispered back, "You came back." I ran. I didn't stop running until I burst into the daylight. I drove into town as soon as the ground hardened enough to move the car. I went straight to the old local cafe, asking about the house. Silence fell instantly. An elderly woman near the counter put down her coffee and said, "You should have never gone there." I asked her why. She sighed, voice trembling with memory. 40 years ago, a family lived there. The mother started hearing noises, knocking from inside the walls. People thought she was sick, but she kept saying the same thing. The woman leaned closer. "He won't stop crawling. He keeps asking for help." "What happened to them?" I whispered. "No one knows." Police found the house empty. Furniture overturned, blood in the basement. They searched the walls but found nothing. The family just vanished. I felt sick. "Who was in the walls?" I asked. She looked at me with hollow eyes. "Not who, what?" I should have left town right then, but I had one problem. My toolbox was still inside. Everything I owned, ID cards, work gear, was inside it. And without returning the keys to Mr. Larkin, I wouldn't get paid. So I went back. But something was wrong the moment I stepped onto the porch. The front door was wide open, though I'd locked it before leaving. Inside, the air felt heavier, like the house was breathing. My toolbox lay in the center of the living room as if someone had dragged it there. Then came the knocking. Not from the walls this time, from upstairs. Knock, knock, knock. Slow, patient, expectant. I swallowed hard and looked up. Footsteps approached the top of the staircase, one creaking step at a time. I whispered, "Who's there?" A soft voice answered, "You didn't listen." The footsteps rushed down the stairs, fast, inhumanly fast. I sprinted to the kitchen, grabbing the first thing I could find, a rusty hammer. The knocking grew louder, echoing through the entire house from every direction. Walls, ceiling, floor, knock, knock, knock. Then the walls bulged outward, like something huge pressed against them from the inside. Plaster cracked, wood snapped. A hand, long, gray, bony, pushed through the wall inches from my face. Fingers stretched unnaturally long. Another hand emerged beside it. Something crawled out, its body contorted, joints bending the wrong way, skin pale and sagging like wet paper. Its face was a blur of stretched flesh. No eyes, just a mouth that opened too wide. The voice that came from that mouth wasn't human. "Stay with us." I ran. I didn't look back as the creature dragged itself across the floor behind me, nails scraping the wood. I bolted through the front door, into the blinding daylight. The house let out a sound, a deep groan, almost disappointed, before falling silent. I drove away without stopping, without breathing, without thinking. When I reached the main road, I finally dared to look in the rearview mirror. Something was in the back seat, a piece of paper, the same handwriting as before. It read, "You left too late. He's with you now." My blood ran cold. I pulled over, shaking, searching the back seat. Nothing. Nobody. But when I looked again at the paper, new words had appeared beneath the old ones, words that hadn't been there seconds ago. He likes new walls. The edges of the paper dripped with something dark, wet, red. I dropped it instantly. Now, weeks later, I still hear knocking at night, inside my apartment walls, behind my headboard, inside the bathroom tiles. Slow, patient, waiting. I don't knock back. I know better now, but I fear the day he crawls out again.